Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. We still have the winter storm warning out for the Brooks Range here, and that's out tonight and tomorrow until actually 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. And that's for areas above 2,000 feet for anywhere from 4 to 6 inches of snow, more snow, again above 2,000 feet specifically along the Dalton Highway south of Galbraith Lake. And from there, fire danger barely reaching the high category here, back up over the northwest, near the Sullivan Valley and near Buckland, and then a little bit off to the southeast there, just north of the Yukon. Barely, especially this area, just really on the edge. It kind of probably could have dropped that one, but it's just about over here statewide. So this may be possibly the last fire danger map we show, but may carry on a few days more. Anyway, moving on to satellite imagery. System here moving eastward, now taking a turn to the southeast, and that's kind of hanging the front up along the southeast coast this afternoon, rolling that again. And you can see really it's not moving through, it's just sort of stationary there, and rain falling much of the day across the panhandle with Ketchikan picking up 7/10 of an inch of precipitation with that feature. And then some clouds, all this clouding associated with an upper level trough, a cold trough coming down, and places over the Copper River Basin, or actually the eastern Alaska Range. The Besna picked up ½ an inch of precipitation today, and ¼ of an inch over at Delta Junction. Otherwise, Yakutat about 2/3 of an inch. And then amount's pretty light, just a few hundredths of an inch in the 12-hour period in at 3 p.m. here for the actually up to the north and the Arctic coast. Sagwan, though, picked up 1/10 of an inch water equivalent precipitation. Otherwise, clearing here, Kodiak Island, northwest winds gusting 45 miles an hour at AKwx, and the flow on the backside of this low, much drier, as you can see, breaking out Bristol Bay. Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula seeing some sunshine this afternoon, and back southern Kuskokwim Valley areas. Next system out here over the Bering Sea, bringing some breezy wind conditions and precipitation with it eastward. And on the chart, about a 995 center there, just north of Adak, with the front and the rain extending eastward, pushing it up toward the Pribilofs, and streaming in with a warm front toward, actually in toward Cold Bay and back across the Fox Islands. And then the break here with the gusty winds, 45 miles an hour, as I just mentioned, at AKwx there, and less at Kodiak State Airport. Isolated scattered showers, mostly cloudy back here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, but clearing Bristol Bay up into the Kuskokwim Valley, eastward into south central Alaska, sunshine, Kodiak Island, and some sunshine up here over the northwest as well. Looks like Noatak Valley into the Kobuk Valley, portions of the Seward Peninsula, and starting to clear out here over the St. Lawrence Island area to the Bering Strait. North winds, pretty gusty, gust 40 miles an hour at Tin City out of the north this afternoon, and Gamble about 35 miles an hour there. Arctic coast with the rain and snow conditions going on. Again, not really heavy, pretty light actually, but winds 25 to 30 miles an hour out of the east there for the eastern stretch of the coastline. And again, the rain with this system into the southeast coast, and minimum gales along that front in advance, mostly along the outer coastline in those offshore marine areas. And for tonight, that system continues to slide southeastward there, so rain will continue much of the night for Prince of Wales Island and over the northern areas as the flow becomes offshore there on the north side of that low center, and some periods of rain here with that upper trough, and snowfall levels coming down. So areas above 3,000 feet or so probably be in the form of snow, 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Otherwise, it'll be kind of an area of rain, showers all the way down into maybe the Chugach Mountains and eastward into the North Coast Range there in the Wrangels, back along the central Alaska Range, but drier back to the west. Next system, though, coming up, spreads rain across the Alaska Peninsula, reaching the southwest coast here toward morning. And the snow warning out for the Eastern Brooks Range, again, 4 to 8 inches of snow above 2,000 feet. And looking ahead to tomorrow, this system continues to advance northeastward, good southwest flow, bringing moderate amounts of rain into the southwest part of the state here, into Kodiak Island. increasing clouds later in the afternoon, Cook Inlet, and rain could make its way into southern Cook Inlet during the latter part of the afternoon tomorrow, including Seldovia, maybe Homer, but should be partly sunny, Prince William Sound, back to the northwest. Scattered showers here over the eastern interior areas, becoming more than scattered, kind of numerous up toward the Brooks Range there, and then a mixture of rain or snow, eastern Arctic coast, North Slope areas, and kind of dry back to the west. Panhandle, partly to mostly sunny conditions. And the outlook for Wednesday, that front pushes rain, probably heavy rain, into the eastern North Gulf Coast, say roughly from Elfin Cove over to maybe Cordova. Because see heavy amounts of rain, with the heaviest there right at Yakutat. And rain back to the main low center, good trough swinging up with that system. So very wet here across southern Alaska on Wednesday. This washing out front up here, that'll produce some rain. Warmer conditions now, the cold air now kind of backing off to the west here, and definitely rain up to the Brooks Range with that system, but light amounts and rain spreading back in over the southeast coast, and pretty gusty winds here. Bristol Bay into Kodiak Island, next system pushing more rain, and maybe minimum gales possibly here into the western and then the central Aleutians. Lows tonight, upper 20s to near 30 over the eastern Brooks Range area. Otherwise lower to mid-30s along the Arctic coast, warming to near 40 there at Point Hope. Otherwise 40s over much of the remainder of the state, with mid-30s into the Tanana Valley.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic for Tuesday morning. Lots of IFR, Bering Sea into the southwest coast. In fact, actually eastward across Kuskokwim Valley to the western Alaska Range. Southward here, Alaska Peninsula, and a fair amount of the Aleutians, some VFR over the west central interior, Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, and Kobuk Valley. IFR here from the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, right on up, kind of catching some of the Koyukuk Valley there, then expanding over the eastern Brooks Range and Arctic coast. VFR, North Gulf Coast into the southeast coast, some marginal stuff around Prince of Wales Island, and the Kenai Peninsula looks VFR. And for the afternoon, we got that moisture streaming on northeastward here fairly rapidly. Possibly the western Alaska Range going, the southern pass there going marginal VFR. Definitely down here around Iliamna going IFR in the afternoon, along with Bristol Bay, sliding right up into Kodiak Island, Bering Sea to the Aleutians. A little bit of a break here behind the front of breaking out to marginal there with Unalaska Island to the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, VFR here, west central interior, and to a lesser extent, here from Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Manauskas-Susitna Valley, across the Copper River Basin, on up into the far upper Tanana Valley and 40-mile country, and then some marginal VFR roughly from Valdez to Cordova, on over to Yakutat, and VFR for the southeast coast. Tuesday morning, moisture slips on in there for some marginal VFR along the coast and over the northern panhandle, and IFR, Gulf of Alaska, up into at least the coast range here, trying to push into the southern Copper River Basin. Better chance to the west here, but IFR sliding across south central Alaska, back to the west across the Kuskokwim Valley, on down to, say, Dillingham, up to roughly Tooksuk Bay, maybe a little beyond there. Much of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta IFR, back across the Pribilos, southern Bering Sea, narrow area of VFR over the central interior on up to the northwest coast from Nome there, and IFR eastern or central Arctic coast eastward, as well as much of the North Slope. And then for the afternoon, that improves. That IFR pulls back to the central and east side of the coastline up there. VFR up over the northwest, southward across Buckland down to White Mountain, and Nome right on the edge of the marginal VFR, which covers much of the Bering Sea out here. Narrow band of IFR still persisting from the Cape Newenham, Kuskokwim River Valley area, then kind of northeastward there, and also along the western and central Alaska Range. And western Prince William Sound, IFR sliding into the southeast coast from the Gulf of Alaska. And four passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR. Same forecast for Adigan, marginal at times tomorrow, especially on the northern entrance, both passes. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, becoming VFR. Now Lake Clark has a chance of going back to marginal with that moisture coming in from the southwest. Otherwise rainy, marginal VFR becoming VFR through the afternoon. And windy, same trend, marginal VFR, going VFR for the entire afternoon. Isabel, marginal to VFR. Not so optimistic for Mentasta. I'll start out IFR, but it still could possibly become VFR late in the day. And for Tanita, VFR, and Portage, VFR. Moving over to Chilkoot and White, both looking good tomorrow with VFR flying through both passes. On to freezing levels here. At the surface, Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, 2,000 feet south side of the Brooks Range. They're actually getting into northern Norton Sound there to St. Lawrence Island, sloping up 10,000 feet across Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, 12,000 feet still touching the Alaska Peninsula. And icing, moisture sliding on northeastward throughout the day tomorrow. Tomorrow mid-afternoon should look something like this with occasional or considerable moderate rime icing. Bristol Bay down across the Alaska Peninsula with just isolated moderate here back to the west and scattering out over the probably mixed icing back here for lost eastern Aleutians to Atka Island. And this area icing above about 4,000 feet, slowly dissipating, just areas of light mostly. Probably won't be anything in the way of moderate. And the jet stream, cold upper lows here, one in over the just north of the Tanana Valley, and southerly jet here links up, and that puts squeeze in the atmosphere. You got westerlies 140 knots right across southern Alaska, 9,000 feet, 50 to 60 knot winds here with this next storm coming in, 25 roughly around that low in the interior, lighter over the panhandle, and turbulence looking something like this.
You guys got everything tied down back there? Yeah. Yep. We're going through the lee of St. Elias, so there might be some turbulence.
Fasten seatbelt sign on.
Well, who am I to tell you what to do?
There are tens of thousands of glaciers in Alaska. Some stunning cliffhangers, others wide glaciers that come down to meet the ocean tides. Some, like this one we flew over in August, are easily visible from low Earth orbit and are mesmerizing from 1,000 feet above, and have trees growing on top of their soil-laden boundaries. Those glaciers, although they represent only a fraction of the world's ice, are contributing much more than their share to sea level rise. Chris Larson and his colleagues have repeatedly measured 220 of them in a small single-engine otter, measuring their height with lasers and their depth with radar, and watching them change from season to season and year to year. But Alaskan glaciers are also different. We're only just figuring out how they all behave. Data from flights like these, part of NASA's Operation Icebridge, can help fill the gaps. Chris and radar specialist Martine Trufer are both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and both seasoned Alaskan pilots. But they rely on their good friend and legendary bush pilot Paul Kloss and his 35,000 hours in the cockpit to fly the incredibly demanding flight lines the mission requires.
And does it help you guys being pilots too?
I would like to think so, but watching Paul fly and seeing what he does, it's kind of like trying to learn quantum mechanics in kindergarten.
You know, I can fly my airplane around, but just seeing what Paul does in this extremely challenging environment in the mountains while trying to follow a specific flight line at a specific altitude above ground, negotiating winds, topography, maybe occasional low-level clouds that you have to get around, and just managing all that is just several levels above what I could do as a pilot.
Well, I think the first time I came here to this park, I was probably 4 years old with my father. I've been blessed to be able to fly in lots of places in the world, all over the place actually, almost every continent. I guess I'm always looking for some place that might be better than this, but I haven't found it.
Paul's plane is about 60 years old and is the first single-engine Otter ever retrofitted with a 1,000 horsepower engine, which makes takeoffs feel effortless and gives Paul the ability to negotiate wild terrain, which he certainly did during the first 2 incredible science flights of this campaign. And with sunny skies and relatively calm air, we covered 3 vastly different pieces of ice. While Paul fueled up the plane, Chris gave us a preview of the day's science and scenery.
So it has one of the greatest coastal reliefs anywhere in the world. So it's between the ocean and the summit of Mount St. Elias, which is 18,008 feet high. It's less than 10 miles. There's a stupendous amount of mountain right off the ocean. It's hard to beat it anywhere in the world. It might be the prettiest for me. It's absolutely stunning. From here in McCarthy, we'll cross one of the bigger precipitation gradients in Alaska too. Here it's about 10 inches of precipitation a year, and we'll go over to an area where it's on the order of 200 inches per year. So it's from one of the driest parts of Alaska to one of the wettest parts of Alaska in about 45 minutes flight time.
Oh, that's pretty good.
That's awesome. You want to do Tyndall next?
Sure, where you want?
If the winds are calm now, might as well grab it.
First, we came to the rugged landscape of Icy Bay, which not that long ago wasn't a bay at all. It was filled with ice. Tidewater glaciers in this region can make dramatic advances and retreats as they feed on high rates of snowfall and then retreat as they're melted by warm ocean waters. Like the Tyndall Glacier seen here, most of these glaciers have retreated dramatically over the last 100 years. But nearby Yahtzee Glacier, after years of retreat, is currently the most rapidly advancing glacier in Alaska. Overall, though, the Icebridge Alaska surveys, from the Denali region in the north to the Juneau ice field in the southeast, have documented pretty substantial thinning of glacial ice. Areas seen here in orange and red show between about 10 and 15 feet of thinning per year.
There's a nice waterfall up there from the hanging ice.
When we very first started profiling this, Paul, this gravel fan and the one in the valley next to it didn't exist.
I was going to say,
this was
look at all the good landing spots here.
Yeah,
There's no place to land here before.
no, it was deep water.
After covering several of Icy Bay's glaciers, given that it was time for lunch, just like that, we landed in this unforgettable spot. Flying eastward, leaving Icy Bay behind, we came to the mighty Malaspina, one of the Earth's great examples of a Piedmont glacier that spills out like pancake batter onto a broad plain as it approaches the sea. It surges at uneven intervals, creating dramatic patterns on its surface as it distorts the moraines of rock and soil borne along by the glacier. The Malaspina is less dynamic than the Yahtzee and is only melting at about the average rate for Alaska, but that could change quickly.
It has the potential for being one of the bigger geographic evolutions in Alaska. Certainly my son will be able to witness some big geography changes there. There's potential for it being connected with the ocean through some narrow lagoons, estuaries, which would take a little bit of coastal erosion, but it's not too hard to imagine that where the Malaspina Glacier is now could become a large bay.
The data that Martine's radar provides could reveal how vulnerable the Malaspina is to melting by the nearby ocean. Here we see the radar returns from the surface of the glacier, and here is something that Chris's lasers can't see, the rocky bed of the glacier, giving us both clues as to what's happening under the ice, as well as a measurement of its thickness. Finally, we came to the Yakutat ice field, 300 square miles of absolutely doomed ice perched high in the mountains. Researchers even debate how this ice field came to be at all, since in its current configuration, it's hard to imagine how it could capture enough snow to form glacial ice. And so, even if the Arctic weren't warming faster than the rest of the planet, this area would be likely to melt within a century or two. But with many other glaciers, it's easier to see the connection between a warming planet and ice loss. Thanks to data from IceBridge and other surveys, we now have a good estimate of the current rate of loss from Alaskan glaciers, 75 gigatons a year. While airborne observations over Alaskan glaciers have provided a rich record of change in the area, those efforts are now augmented by NASA's newest ice measuring tool, IceSat-2. With 6 laser beams of its own, and orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, the satellite will carry on the record of Alaskan change. For their part, Chris and his team will continue to do their surveys for at least the next 2 years, helping to validate the IceSat-2 data and make further detailed observations over the stunning glaciers of Alaska.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of change from yesterday, but there is new ice forming here along the edge up here with the edge roughly a little near or a little over 400 nautical miles north of Point Barrow, so way out there. But it is starting to reform up there now, and so we may hit the minimum ice extent possibly, but no big advance southward expected, kind of just oscillating around up there for the next several days with gradual growth. And coastal water forecast, northeast winds 20 knots here on the south coast tomorrow, 10 to 11 foot seas. West-northwest 15, north coast there. Lynn Canal, light southerlies at 10, northwest 15 for the central and southern inside waters. Seas running about 3 feet. And for Wednesday, small craft advisories for Lynn Canal, south 25 knots, seas 5 feet. Gale force gusts here for Stevens Passage with a sustained wind out of the south at 20, and then northwest at 15 for Clarence Strait. Same for the south coast here, the central coast west-southwest at 20 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. Small craft advisories on the extreme north coast, 25 knots and 8-foot seas. Cook Inlet north at 10, pretty light tomorrow, seas 2 feet or less. Southeast 15, Kamishak Bay. Westerlies 20 knots, coming down to 20 knots for the Barren Islands with seas at about 7 feet. For the North Gulf Coast, southwest winds at 15 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas, and Prince William Sound north winds at 15 with 2 foot seas. And moving on to outlook for Wednesday here for Cook Inlet, southerlies 20 knots north of the Foreland. Small craft advisories for southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, south 30 knots, 8 to 8 foot seas. Southwest 30 for the Barren Islands and 25 knot winds for the western North Gulf Coast. And back up to 30 knots there for the eastern coast and 10 foot seas. Prince William Sound, southeast 30 knots and 7 foot seas. Kodiak Island, southwest 20 to 25 with 5 to 7 foot seas. Then we've got south winds here, 30 knots. Small craft advisory Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev with 8 to 9 foot seas. South 30 knots also for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula with 7 foot seas, and Bristol Bay southeast at 20 with seas at 4 feet. And then the outlook for Wednesday, Kodiak Island areas, southwest 30 knots, seas 11 to 14 feet with gale force winds from Sitkinak all the way down here to Cape Sarachev, out of the southwest at 35 with seas as high as 18 feet. Small craft advisories on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, southwest 30, 9 foot seas, and west 25, seas at about 7 feet for Bristol Bay. Aleutians, Fox Islands, south-southwest 30, 35 knots with the gales, Pacific side of the islands, and seas 15 to 16 feet. Good west winds at 35 to 40 knots there for the Adak-Atka area, and seas 14 to 17 feet. Minimum gales extend out to, I'll call it Amchitka Island, then 25 knots out of the northwest from there on out. And for Wednesday, east-southeast 30 knots here. Areas west of Adak, seas 13 to 15 feet. Central Aleutians here, southwest 25 with 9-foot seas. And the Fox Islands, looks like some gale force westerlies there on the Pacific side on Alaska Island, otherwise west-southwest at 30 with 13 to 15-foot seas. And for the southwest coast, small craft advisories, winds right out of the east, 25 to 30 knots here with seas running 6 to 9 feet. Southeast 20 for the Pribilofs, and northeasterly gales, St. Matthew Island at 35. Northeast winds extend all the way up toward the Bering Strait, but diminish here down to 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots in Norton Sound. Outlook for Wednesday, north 25, Norton Sound, 30-knot winds here, St. Lawrence Island, into the northern Bering Sea, Yukon Delta coast, Kuskokwim Delta coastline northwest at 20, and northwest 20 for the Pribilofs. Beaufort Sea, central and east side tomorrow, not bad, northeast at 15, seas 3 to 4 feet, north 15 here on the west side down to Cape Thompson, 20 knots from the north, Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Wednesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, north 15. East-northeast, 20 knots here for the east side, central coast, east 15, light easterlies for the Beaufort Sea, eastern Beaufort Sea coast with 5-foot seas. And for tonight, upper level trough here, and that's what keeps this winter storm warning going in the Brooks Range there along the Dalton Highway south of Galbraith Lake for 48 inches, snow above 2,000 feet. Otherwise, rain, some of these showers could be on the moderate side here over the eastern interior down into the Copper River Basin. More rain spreading northeast, and that continues on Tuesday and Monday, wet in southern Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.